Started. All right, so we're recording. So welcome everybody to SDI week number 1. I want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Dan Williams. My contact information is up there on the screen. But the easiest way to get a hold of me is Slack. Now, I will be the instructor for both sections 1 and 2 of SDI this month. So no matter which class you're in, I will be your instructor. All right. I want to talk a little bit about what SDI is in general. So in this class, what we're basically going to focus on is the basics of programming. Now, what that means is we're going to take bigger problems, start to figure out how to make them smaller problems, and then solve the smaller problems, and then add those little problems back up until they are the final solution to our bigger problem. Now, this sounds harder than it really is, but in basic theories is each time we train you guys to do something, for example, to prompt the user, then the bigger program just uses that smaller skill, but in many more times. Now, that's going to make sense when we start talking about the actual graded assignments for this week as well. Okay. Now, along the way, we're going to teach you the basic terminology of programming. So by the end of this class, you're going to learn what a variable is, what a conditional is, what a loop is, functions, and so on and so on. Now, the reason that this is important is this class is going to be the base that all of the programming classes are going to be based on. And what I mean by that is you are going to learn what a variable is in this course. Now, in the next course, they're not going to teach you what a variable is because you're already going to know that. What they're going to instead tell you is how do you actually create a variable in the new language that we are actually learning. Now, in SDI, we're going to be learning C#. So that is the initial language that we're going to be learning in. Now, when you learn the next one, say it's going to be I don't know actually what you guys get taught next. Actually, I'm not sure what you guys get taught next. Either Java, JavaScript, it could be Objective-C, it could be Swift, it could be basically anything. The great part is we don't really have to go through what a variable is. It's just how to make it in that new language. John thinks it's Java. I'm actually not sure. The funny thing is this class used to be Java because Java and C# are very similar to each other. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of like Portuguese and Spanish almost. So they're kind of similar. People can kind of understand it, but there are differences along the way. And along the way, kind of language is a good similarities for that. So for example, if I said hello or I said a greeting, right? In English, that would be hello. And if I explain what a greeting is, it's when you meet somebody for the first time and you exchange pleasantries. Great. Now, what is it in Spanish? So how do I greet somebody in Spanish? Does anybody know? Anybody speak Spanish on this one? Yeah, hola, right? So hola means the same thing, but in a new language. So I don't have to tell you what a greeting is, right? How about German? Does anybody speak German? Well, it's willkommen, right? Greg says hallo, which I don't know if that's right. I think it's willkommen, which means welcome, right? But you guys get the kind of point. So the more computer languages you're going to be learning, it's just different ways to do something that you're going to be learning the basics of in this class. All right. So it's very important that by the time you reach the end of SDI, you're very comfortable explaining what a variable is, what a conditional is. So that's the if statements, the loops and functions. Okay. And then in future classes, they're going to go through this more in general, and they're going to kind of speed through it. So you need to make sure that you got that at the very minimum. Now, let's go through what is covered on FSO. So week number 1 has a lot of stuff, which I'm sure you guys have noticed because I saw you guys chatting in the chat window. Everybody's like, there is a lot of assignments. And for week number 1, there actually is. Because when we're doing SDI, we're going to assume that everybody comes into this course with no programming background, which means we have to teach you everything from scratch. So as you can imagine, there's a very steep learning curve. So before you can actually program anything, right? Because you have to learn how to use Visual Studio, how to create a C# file, how to actually output to the user using a console.write line. How do I get input from a user? Well, that's a console.read line. So all of these basic things before we can actually make anything, right? So if we go through and look through a normal SDI section, the first one is always going to be do these as soon as possible. Now, welcome to SDI is just a general welcome, kind of explains what the course is. The next one is going to be getting help. Now, this is super important, so I'm actually going to kind of preview it for you. Now, the first thing that you should always try to do is if you get stuck, is try Googling it. And it sounds like I'm making a joke or something like that, but I'm not, right? So, the important thing about programming is being able to solve your own issues. Now, of course, if you have something major, then just pop on to Slack, which we talked a little bit about at the very beginning. It's the best way to communicate. And you can ask questions on there, and then you can always communicate with your lab instructors or me, your instructor, or even your students can help you, or other future, well, not others, like other current students can kind of help you as well. All right. But the important thing about Googling something is make sure you're Googling the error and not the assignment. Now, what I mean by that is one of the future things is going to be a Mad Lib assignment for week number 1. Now, you should never type in C# Mad Lib code because that's going to give you somebody else's code. And just copying and pasting somebody else's code is plagiarism. And even if you change a little bit of it, it's still going to be plagiarism. All right. Now, instead, if you get stuck, maybe Google C# prompting the user, and then that will actually give you like a kind of a step in the right direction. And then you take what you learn and then you actually create your own thing from it. And John is correct. It is a big no-no to use other people's code. Okay, so that goes into the professionalism as well. It basically, and it comes down to like this simple sentence: if the code is not yours, don't use it. Which also means do not share your code, your actual code, with other students. Now, I get this every now and again where people try to help other students, and they send them their code, and then that student will use the code, and then they both get caught for plagiarism, and they get zeros on the assignment, and it could be a 0 for the whole entire class. So make sure that you are very careful and keep your code protected so nobody else will use that as well. Okay. Now, if you have trouble, of course, try to Google it. And C# has been around for a long time, so there is a lot of documentation online for it. Also, Microsoft kind of has all of the documentation for C#, so you can always trust anything on the Microsoft site as well. Now, for this month, we do have our lab assistants come popping in and out of Slack. They're going to be Bob Cook, Carl Rohr, and me, of course. And there's a couple other instructors that pop in and out. You'll see Lee Lewis on there because he is another instructor for this course, just not this month. But he's on there. Doug Obendorf's on there. You might see Rebecca Carroll. She's like the department chair for this whole section of your degree, and everybody else in between. Now, generally, I'm always on there later in the evening, so you won't find me on there till like the afternoon or evenings. And usually it's Monday to Saturday. Okay. The good thing is by messaging us on Slack, it actually buzzes my pocket. So it's a much shorter response time than emailing me or even messaging me on FSO, because then I have to be at a computer to be able to check those. All right. So does everybody understand the difference? Slack, better, faster, much more communication on there. Okay. All right. So let's get out of this one. And then we'll go down to the other ones, which is setting up your IDE and setting up your Slack Messenger. Okay. Now, setting up your IDE is how we're going to be creating our virtual machine inside of our Mac. Now, this sounds a lot harder than it is, but basically, VMware Fusion creates a whole little Windows computer that lives inside of your Mac. So inside of this window is a whole entire Windows computer. Now, it's super important that we're using the Windows computer, and once we get this installed, we're going to be installing our Visual Studio for Windows, all right? I always get this question too. People are like, hey, Dan, do you know there's Visual Studios for Mac? And I'm like, yes, I do. The problem is it's not powerful enough for future classes. So for right now, until they get it better developed on the Mac side, because that's actually new from maybe 2 years ago, we have to still use the Windows and the Visual, let me try that again, Visual Studio for Windows, okay? John says, VMware is great, but it kills the battery. This is true. Notice mine is already down, and I'm just plugged it in because mine was actually dying as well. But it is because you're actually running 2 separate computers inside of each other. That's kind of why. All right. The number one thing that people get wrong, by the way, when they're setting up the VMware is that they do not share their files. All right. So what you could do is make sure that your files are shared between your Windows and Mac side, is you have to come up to virtual machine, and then make sure this says reinstall VMware tools. If it says install, then you probably did not set this up correctly. So you're going to want to make sure that you actually go ahead and reinstall those VMware tools, or if you have them installed, it's fine. And then what you have to do is inside of your VMware, at the top left-hand corner, you're going to see this little wrench icon. Now that's going to be your settings. So we're going to click on that. Then we click on sharing. And inside of here, just make sure we have the enable shared folders checked, and all of your folders are going to be mirrored. Okay. Now, what this does is it actually will make your files be able to be accessed from your Windows side and your Mac side. Now, this is going to be really important because you're going to be using both kind of at the same time. So you're basically going to code on your Windows side, but then a majority of the students will actually use the internet and submit their files on the Mac side. And we're going to go through a little bit about making sure that this is set up correctly when we create a file a little bit later as well. Okay, so we're going to get back to this, making sure everything is going to be correct. But in the meantime, make sure that you have enabled your shared folders. All right, now the next one is going to be setting up your Slack Messenger. Now, Slack Messenger is, of course, going to be the communication tool that we actually prefer here. And it is a two different things. You can either have a mobile version on your phone, you can use it on your browser, or you can actually just install it to your Mac. And it kind of looks, let me put that back on the screen. It kind of looks a little bit like this. Now, it's wonderful because we have our own SDI channel. And inside of here is where the lab assistants will come on. For example, Carl is going to tell everybody he's here until 5 o'clock. And so you know he's available to be chatted with. And you can type in your questions on the main SDI channel, and people will kind of chime in and help you fix your errors. Also, if you need to send somebody your code, then you can only send your code to anyone that actually is a lab assistant or your instructor. All right, so Carl was a good one. Me, I'm on there, Dan Williams, and then Bob is up here a little bit because I saw him sign in. Here's Bob Cook. And again, he's going to come in and just kind of introduce himself, let you know that he's on Tuesday, Thursday from 8:30 p.m. till 12:30, so he's a night guy. And of course, Saturday from 7 till 9 p.m. as well. All right, so if you guys have any kind of questions, jump in there and you will be able to ask these questions. All right, so does anybody have any kind of questions about Slack? It is also an industry-wide tool, so a lot of different companies are using Slack, and it is wonderful. I do want to point out one thing. When you're uploading things to Slack, for example, how Angela uploaded these screenshots, you might see an error that we're out of space. And let me see if I can actually pull up that error, because I think I screenshot it. Let me just check real quick, see if I can find it. Nope. I thought I had it. Hold on a minute. Oh, there it is. It's on my desktop. All right. So if you see this error where it says your workspace has reached the free plan storage limit, to add more files to Slack, you need to upgrade to a paid plan. Don't worry about that. Okay. So what it means is you can actually just continue to click the button in the bottom right-hand corner, the upload, and it'll upload it. Now, what this means is all of the older files will just fall off, and we have like a couple months back, so you don't really have to worry about this. So just ignore this, and you can actually just upload it like normal. Oh, Marlene actually got that same message, right? So just ignore it. Aaron's making fun of my screenshotted. I don't know. But yeah, just go ahead and click the upload button, and don't have to worry about it. All right. So that's one of the most common errors that I always get. People are like, why is it asking me to pay? And I'm like, no, don't pay. It's free. All right. So that's why. All right. So that is Slack. Now, the next whole section is all about the go-to trainings. And I would hope you guys would saw these because you guys are already here. So the 14 of you that actually showed up, thank you very much for coming to the live session. And anybody watching later, you're going to find the links actually in this same assignment. So where it had the link to go to the new one or the actual live session, I'm going to change that to be the link to the archived YouTube thing as well. Okay. All right. Next ones. So this is the general information section. This is all about the course and academic honesty, the deadlines and late work and extensions and resubmission guidelines. Now, this class is extremely hard, so just know that up front. So we actually have a lot of retakes. And if you find yourself as one of the people that are retaking the class, you have to make sure that you adhere to the resubmission guidelines. Now, it basically means that you have to take a screenshot of your previous feedback and upload that with your new and improved assignment. All right. John said, yes, it is. So make sure that you are learning from your past mistakes. That's the important thing about that. Because on each assignment, I'm going to give you detailed feedback that's going to give you an idea of what to do better on your second time around. All right. Now, if you got 100 on an assignment, then you just take a normal screenshot of your 100% that you did everything great, and you can just upload that with your previous assignment with no changes. That's basically the resubmission guideline. Deadlines, late work, and extensions. It's all pretty much in there, so you can take your time and read it. But it really comes down to deadlines are very strict here at Full Sail. And so for every day late, it is going to be 25 points off. And that starts even 1 minute late. So everything is going to be due on Sunday night by midnight. So if it's Monday morning at 1 a.m., right, so just like an hour late, then it is already 25 points directly off the top. All right, so make sure that you get everything on time or early if possible. And the other question I get quite a lot is, hey, can I have an extension? And extensions are not given for this course. So the answer is no. Oh, John, actually, that's a really good thing. And also, late work is not accepted on week number 4 assignments because everything is due on Thursday night by midnight, and that's a hard due date. Any course that's going to be an immediate retake has to be Thursday night at midnight. Okay, so that's like a hard deadline that I can't even do anything about. All right, so moving on. Let's go down, and then we have our general information graded assignments. Now, anything that says graded assignments, make sure you are paying attention to this. And this is where you're going to be uploading your screenshot for your Slack Messenger and your screenshot for Visual Studio. Now, if you notice, they are 0%, but does anybody know why that they are in the graded assignments section? Did anybody get to that point yet? Why are the screenshot for Slack and Visual Studio inside of the graded section? Nobody got there yet? All right, so I'll show you why. Because you have to do them, and if you didn't do them, then unfortunately you get a deduction of 30 points out of your professionalism score. So you're not getting points for doing it, you get negative points for not doing it. And the reason that we do it this way is that these are the basics that are required for the course. So that is why we don't give you points for it. But like any professional job, if you don't do the basics, then we take away from your professionalism. So make sure that you are diligent and getting your screenshots in on time. Okay, so both of those. Then, of course, we have your professionalism, which is going to be 10% of your grade, and it's 10% of every grade here at Full Sail. So that should be like a standard across the board. And then we come down to the course information quiz, which is only worth 1%. I think it has 16 questions about all the general information that you read earlier. All right. Finally, we get down to week number 1, Intro to Programming. And this is going to be where we start talking about problem solving in general and taking a bigger problem and breaking it down into smaller chunks. One of my favorite things for this kind of a theory is asking students if they can build me a bookshelf. All right, live students, can anybody build me a bookshelf? Can anybody build me a bookshelf? I get sure, yeah, and Alexandria is the one that is correct because she says yes, from IKEA, right? And Max did too. So that is correct. Now, the thing is, even if you don't possess woodworking skills, really IKEA furniture, by its very nature, their whole business says anybody can do it as long as they have the tools that are required, the basic materials, and a detailed instructions with how to actually build it, right? So think about it. If you have the stack of wood and they say put piece of wood number A mixed with piece of wood B and use the screw that's pictured here using the screwdriver that we gave you, you could put it together and you would actually build a whole entire bookcase, right? But it is small, tiny steps like putting one board with one board and fixing with a screw. And you keep doing small steps until you end up with a whole entire bookcase, right? All right. Same thing like if I said, how many people use or play with Legos or played with Legos when they were a kid, right? They come with like 5,000 pieces and you make a Death Star. John says he still does. Don't worry, I do too. So it's like 5,000 pieces make a Death Star. But if I dump 5,000 Lego bricks in front of you without telling you what to make or giving you any instructions, chances are you're not going to build me a Death Star, right? But if I give you detailed instructions and tell you step by step what to do, then you could follow them and make a whole Death Star, right? So it is a bigger problem. Build me a Death Star. Okay, breaking it down into smaller things, hook block A to block B to block C, and blah, blah, blah. And you can build it back up to make something bigger than the sum of its parts. All right. So that is what problem solving is all about. Now, the next ones are going to be the screencasts, which initially set up our first C# file. And we're going to make sure that we are doing the .NET framework and making sure we have the whole entire C# file, which we'll, of course, talk about in a minute as well. All right, and then we have the advanced problem solving, which is going to be kind of an interactive quiz where you get to fill it out and answer some tough, challenging questions. All right. Then we come down to the, let me go back up a little bit, to week 1 expressions. Now, week 1 expressions is finally where we start learning how to comment our code, which is little, kind of little notes to our future self or notes to our coworkers that are going to also be seeing our files. And then we also are going to learn about how to use the console. Now, the console is where we're going to be interacting with the user. And this is going to be the little black box that pops up, and we're going to be able to type things inside of it to the user. So we're going to give them information, and we can actually have the user type inside of it to get information from the user. But this whole entire class is going to be using that console. And for those of you that are a little bit more familiar with computers, it's going to be a lot like pretty much a DOS prompt window, if you know what that is, right? So it's just kind of a black screen with white text, and it's not pretty at all. But that's okay, all right? Then we're going to come down and we're going to start learning the basics of variables and the different data types of them. So there is a lot of different data types available to us by default. And by the end of the course, we're going to be able to make our own data types. So it's going to be kind of fun. All right. So that is all about variables. We're going to learn what strings are, the different number data types like int and decimal or double, and what each of those is going to be good for as well. Then we come down to expressions, and this is going to be all about week number 1, is learning about basic expressions. Now, what that means, it's basically doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with variables and numbers at the same time, or maybe 2 variables if we're doing something like that. And then finally, we get down to the conversion and prompting. And conversion and prompting is going to be kind of together because inside of there, anytime we prompt the user, we're only going to get one data type back. Did anybody get there yet? Does anybody know what data type is returned anytime that we prompt a user and we're getting stuff back from a console.read line? Anybody get there yet? Well, that data type is going to be a string. See, I was close, but you actually got it. So it is a string data type. Now, strings are great because they can hold basically anything. But the problem is you can't do math with a string, right? So I always use the example, what is 2 times a banana? Well, that doesn't make sense, and it's not 2 bananas, right? You can't multiply a 2 times a banana. Or what is a cat plus a dog, except a really fun Nickelodeon cartoon from a kid, right? But it's not the same thing. So what you have to do is you have to convert these strings into numbers. So in those, there's actually a couple different ways inside of the conversion things, but mainly we're going to be using parse for week number 1 and week number 1 only. All right, so parse. So what that does is it converts a text string into a number data type. And that's going to be inside of the conversion and prompting. Now, on week number 2, we're going to start getting more into validation, and then we can actually use try parse. The good thing about that is it won't let the user break our code. And once you get to the validation in week number 2, you're going to learn a lot more about that. Rachel said it sounds like formulas in Excel, and that is exactly correct. That's exactly how you make it in Excel. The funny thing is, I used to teach Excel and advanced Excel over at Walt Disney World, because that was one of my jobs before, was teaching Excel and Access databases back when they were still a thing. So I used to teach like all of that kind of stuff. It was fun. Anyway, so that is going to be converting and prompting. Now, we come down to finally the week number 1 graded activities. Now, each week we'll have a quiz, and unfortunately, I can't show you the quiz because if I pull it up as an instructor, it will not only give you the questions, it will actually show you the answers. I know. Greg says, "Oh man, I know. Wouldn't it be great just to know the answers?" But it's an interactive quiz, so when you choose the answers, it will tell you immediately if you got it right or wrong as well. Okay, so that is going to be worth 2% of your total grade. Moving on down, we find our first assignment as our grocery calculator, which is also going to be 2% of your grade. So let's take a peek at that one. We're going to preview that. Scrolling on down, and for every single assignment, it's going to have an overview, which is basically a little bit about what we're going to be doing, the level of effort. So this is a best guess from us about how long it should take to create one. And again, if you are better or you have coded before, this might take you a lot less time. If this is your first time, it might take you a lot more time because it's your first assignment. So it's okay, but generally speaking, it should take you about 2 hours of work in order to make this work. All right. Then we come down to the instructions and the rubric, which is going to be the attached PDF. So let's go ahead and take a peek at that. Now, the first page of every single assignment that we're going to give you here at Full Sail is always going to be the rubric. Why is a rubric important? Does anybody know? Who can tell me? In a live class. Who can tell me why a rubric is super important and why we make it come first in every single assignment? Anybody know? Yeah, absolutely. John got it. It tells you what you're expecting, right? So this page, the rubric, tells you how I'm going to be graded. Right, Brad, exactly. So he says what needs to be done and how it's going to be graded and the steps it is. Good, you guys all got this. All right. So the important thing about this is that you read it over, and what I would highly suggest is that you read these boxes in the excellent column. So this right here is what I expect for prompting for this assignment. And if you do that, then you get all of these percentage points. And these percents all add up to 100. So if you get 100 points out of this, then you get 15 out of 15 points, right? If you have some minor errors when prompting the user, then you come down to the next category and you only get 75% of the 15 points, which I think is like 11 or 12 out of 15 for that section, okay? Now, the important thing about this is that you be wary of any boxes that are orange, all right? So the orange boxes are zeros for the entire project. Now, if you just don't include prompts inside of your project, then your program doesn't even meet the minimum requirements. And so that's why it is graded a 0 for the whole entire project. Now, speaking of minimum requirements, we also have bare minimum requirements up here in the left-hand corner of every single assignment. So let's zoom into these. Now, bare minimum requirements must be done or you will get an automatic 0 as well, okay? So you got to make sure that you pay close attention to these. So you have to submit a working C# file with no major syntax errors and no runtime errors. So what this means is once I open your file and try to run it, it has to run. So do not submit a file that contains errors because it's an automatic 0. And the other big thing is you have to submit the whole project folder and not just the C# file. Now, it's important that you have to submit the whole project folder because C# is going to be a compiled language. Now, a compiled language basically means we're going to have a lot of different files and folders inside of our Visual Studios. And before it can actually be run, it's going to be smashed together to one executable file. So it's compiled together into one file. Now, if you only give me one little section of the code and you're missing all of the other stuff that goes into it, I can't compile it to a working file. So that is why it's an automatic 0. Okay. Now, for this one, we're actually going to talk about and show you an example of how to submit the whole project folder. So once we get to that one, make sure that somebody reminds me and be like, Dan, you didn't show us how to submit the whole project folder. So one of you guys in the live class, make sure you check me by the end of the class. All right. All right. So this is all about the initial rubric. So let me go ahead and zoom back out. And coming on down, here we go. So the overview for this is we're going to be building a calculator that's going to add up the cost of items that we're going to buy, and each one's going to have a different quantity and a different price. All right. Now, if we kind of scroll on down more to the actual instructions, here we go. Now, creating a project has to be using this name, and it has to be last name underscore first name underscore grocery calc. Now, obviously, use your own last name and own first name, and it's weird that I have to say that, but I've actually gotten many assignments where it is literally just last name and first name, and I'm like, oh, geez. All right. Now, just for making sure that you name it correctly, I'm going to go back up. Naming it correctly is 5 points, so it is literally half a letter grade that I'm giving you guys just to make sure that you name it correctly. So don't let me down, just name it correctly. All right, and the reason we do that, by the way, is so I can keep track, because I think this month I have 42 students. So just imagine if everybody called their project grocery calculator, how would I tell one from the other? So it's super important, okay? Now, we go down to 3 and A, and we're going to be prompting the prices for different food items. And you have to make sure that you're using these items. So prompt the user for the price of an apple, the price of a steak, and the price of ice cream. So you can say an ice cream container, a gallon of ice cream, or whatever kind of container or amount you want to buy of ice cream, or ice cream bars, or whatever you want. All right. Now, when you are prompting the user, these are going to be strings, but of course we can't do math with those. So you have to make sure that you convert them and store them in the correct data type. And remember, and I give you a hint right here, that when dealing with a cost, there is only one correct data type. Now, don't everybody say it, so don't tell me in the chat window, because you have to watch the videos and make sure you pay careful attention to the number data types, because there is one specific for cost. Okay, so make sure that you're converting to it. Now, after you have those, you're going to be prompting the user for the cost of those individual items. Oops, wait, that was the first thing. Here we go. The cost was first, and now we're going to be prompting for the quantity of those items. So you're going to say, how many apples would you like to buy? How many steaks would you like to buy? And how many ice creams would you like to buy? And of course, you're going to convert those and store them in a number data type as well. Now, you're going to need to do one more thing and prompt the user for the sales tax where they live. And this should be something like 7 for 7% tax. Do not make the user type in 0.07, because no one ever says, oh, my sales tax is 0.07. That's not a thing that people say, right? So don't make the user do any kind of math. Just let them type in the 7. Now, once you have all of this data, and it's basically just 7 prompts from the user, then you have to go ahead and calculate the following. And this is going to be all of G. You're going to give the user the total for each of the different items. Now, for example, if the user buys 3 apples and 1 apple costs 50 cents, then 3 apples will cost them $1.50. All right. So if they bought 2 steaks and each steak was $7, then say 2 steaks will cost you $14. Does everybody get what we're doing here? Now, making sure that you type in this $sign, and you can actually round to 2 decimal places as well. Now, for the first one that we do this, I'm not going to count off points for rounding, but for future, like by week number 2, you're going to have to learn how to round using math.round. You could also use .toString to format it like currency as well. Okay, and all of those are down here in I, so math.round, or .toString C, because that's how we convert it to currency. That's what the C stands for, by the way. Now, after you output the 3 individual totals, you then have to add up all of the totals in general. So the total before tax is going to be 2050. All right. Now, this one, the 2050, make sure that you are creating a variable that holds that value. So do not do math inside of a write line. The reason for this is you're going to need that total later in your code, so there's no point in doing math multiple times. So just make sure that you create a variable for it. Then you're going to have to output just the sales tax. So the sales tax for the item is going to be, for example, $1.25. And then finally, you're going to give them the grand total of the bill, which is going to be this tax, the total before the tax and the sales tax, and you're going to add it together. Okay. Now, if we scroll on down, I do give you test values. Now, test values are going to be working values that you should be able to type into your code in order to test it to make sure it works. So, for example, if the user buys an apple at 50 cents, the cost of a steak is $15.25, and cost of ice cream is $5.75, and they buy 4 apples, 2 steaks, and 1 ice cream, and their sales tax is 7%, then these should be the correct results. All right. And then, of course, we have a second test down here, which is going to be these are the results. Now, test values are going to be super important. Now, these test values have to be inside of your code in a multi-lined comment at the very end of your code. However, do not just copy and paste them. So don't just say, I want to highlight this and I'm just going to click copy and then I'm just going to paste in my code, right? Because that's not what we're actually doing. We want to make sure that you actually type them out and test them with your code. And if I scroll back up to the rubric, notice that test values are going to be 10 points, which is 10% of your total grade. That is 1 letter grade just for making sure that you take the time and test all of those values and ensure that they're correct. Now, we do this because they will help identify problems in your code. For example, if you're always testing the same values, then you might have an error in logic that you don't see automatically, right? So that's where the test values come in handy. All right, so that should be about it for this assignment. And then finally, how to turn it in and a couple don't forgets. But let's go ahead and jump into Visual Studio and take a look at this as a working example. All right, so here we are inside of our Windows machine again. Let me go ahead and drag that out of the way. We're in our examples, and let's go into this grocery calculator. So again, all the student work is going to be in files and folders down there, but when it compiles, it actually saves as an executable file, so I can just launch it from here. And this is an example of a console window, okay? Now, what it's going to be, it's going to be black with white text, and that's about it. So let's type in some values. So type in the apples. How many apples do we want, or do we want to buy, right? So let's actually use those values from our test values. Let's go up here. So we're going to say we are going to buy 4 apples at 50 cents a piece. All right. So let me drag that back out of the way. I'm going to see if I can maybe do that. There we go. How many apples? 4. Great, you purchased 4 apples. What is the cost per apple? Well, the cost per apple is going to be 50 cents. So I'm going to type in 0.50. Great, you said the price of an apple was 50 cents. Now tell us how many steaks you want to buy. So how many steaks? Well, that's going to be 2, right? Notice it doesn't have to be in the same order, but it should be the same things you're prompting for, okay? So 2 steaks, and each steak is going to be $15.25. I just saw John said $13.24 for a steak. That's pretty cheap. I would agree. I think $15 is pretty cheap too, so it's okay. And then it's going to ask us for the amount of ice cream we want. So we only want 1 ice cream. Oops. And we want to say that that is $5.75. There we go. And what is the sales tax? That's going to be 7%. So notice we're just going to type in 7, hit return, and here is our totals. So this is going to be kind of like a receipt that would print out at a store, right? So the ice cream total is going to be $5.75. Let's pull this over so we can kind of see them side by side. There we go. All right, so the ice cream total is down there. So if we match it here, the total cost of ice cream is $5.75. Steak total, $30.50. That looks pretty good as well. Apple cost is $2, so that is correct. The total cost without sales tax, $38.25, which is correct. Total cost of sales tax, $2.68. Now, notice the actual one is $2.6775. But when we're dealing with money, can I pay anybody half of a penny? Right? No. So that is why we round it. So for this example, the student used a .toString, so currency. So then it rounded it to 2.68. And finally, the grand total is going to be $40.93 and $40.93. All right. Does everybody get what we're doing here? Does everybody have any questions about this particular assignment or the working example? Anybody have any kind of questions I can answer before we move on? Nope. I always like that. All right, great. So let's go back over there. All right. So let me close this out one, and then we'll go to the next one. Okay, assignment number 2 is going to be our Mad Libs style story creator. How many people used to play Mad Libs when they were a kid? Anybody play with those? They're basically the books. Yeah, Greg does. They're basically the books that you can ask people different words, but you never tell them what they're for. And then you fill them in blanks inside of a story, and hopefully the outcome is going to be hilarious. Hilarious, right? It's usually not hilarious, but when you're a kid, everything is hilarious. All right. So, of course, page number 1 is going to be that rubric. So, read up, make sure that you do take the time to read the excellent column at the very least, and know how we're going to be grading. Of course, the same bare minimum requirements are going to be here at the top left. Scrolling on down, we do have the links to, if you want to see the actual Mad Libs. So, we'll go ahead and open that in a new tab. These are what Mad Libs look like. Apparently, there we go. So world's greatest, and you put a noun in and people can say whatever they want, right? But they're the little books. I was hoping to show like an actual book, like these things. There you go. So these are Mad Libs. Now, I also give you an online version of Mad Libs that you can try yourself. So if you want to see kind of an interactive example, these are Mad Takes. You can just click on one of these. For example, let's say Rush Hour 3. You can take the time and just type in any number you want, any occupation again, any place, and so on and so on. Or you can just say totally random. The only one it doesn't fill in is here, so I guess I'll put me in if we want somebody there. And a celebrity, we'll say Stan Lee. All right, and we'll say go mad. And then what it does is it creates a whole entire story for you using those prompts. All right, so if we look down here, oh, there's Dan, and apparently Stanley is going to be somewhere in here as well. Oh, there you go. Isn't that funny? Because they actually use Lee pursues the assassin. Wow, well, there you go. All right, so, I know. He always has to make a cameo in everything, so you are correct, Greg. All right, so let's go ahead and keep scrolling on down and finally see how we're going to be creating this. Now, the instructions are, of course, make sure you're naming it correctly, and then you have to prompt the user for 4 different strings. You have to ask for 1 animal, 1 name, 1 adjective, and 1 food item. So these have to be asked for and stored inside of their variables. Then what you're going to do is you're going to prompt them for at least 3 numbers and store them inside of a variable that you create. And then you're going to ask for a year, a cost. Remember, cost is specific for a data type, so don't be fooled. That's the number one thing people get wrong. And a random number. Now, after you have these variables, this is kind of the tricky part, is you have to store the number version in an array that you create. So you're going to be creating a number array with 3 items, and then you're going to fill those in with the year, the cost, and the random number. Now, after you have those 7 different things from the user, 4 strings and 3 numbers stored in one array, then you're going to make a new short story that uses those. And the basic thing is you're going to be outputting this to the user, doing console.writeLines. You're going to write the story, and you're going to concatenate in these variables. So make sure that you're putting in the animal that they type in, the name that they use, and so on and so on. And then the thing that people forget is that you have to use the array values of the numbers inside of your story. So do not use the normal variable year, but use the array you created. All right? So that's always the tricky part between that. And once you get your story, then you can actually run it for the user. There is no test values for this one because literally your story is going to be different than anyone else's. So there is no real test values here, but make sure you run it a couple different times. I also tell people to do the mom test. Does you guys ever know this, right? Like you send your assignment to your mother and you can see if she can break it. And then if she can actually understand it and knows what to do, then it makes sense. So I always do that with my mom, and I still do that to this day, actually. So make sure that you're prompting the user and explaining what you're doing, right? Just for example here, when you start your project, make sure you be like, hey, we're going to do Mad Libs, and I'm going to create a funny story using your prompts, right? That's a good intro. Or if you just say, hey, give me an animal. People are like, well, what do you need an animal for? Here's a dog. Give me a name. What are we doing? Right? So make sure you're explaining it before you actually just berate the user with different prompts. Okay? All right. So what's the working example? And this one is another student's work. So we'll take a peek at it. So I didn't write the story, so you don't have to worry about it. Here we go. All right, so choose an animal. So live class. I need some help here. I need an animal from you guys. First one wins. Give me an animal. I'm not sure what a moose is, but I'm going to say dolphin. All right. Oh, she said moose. It was M-I-I-S-E. It's like Mises. All right. Now I need a name. So because I did that, oh, I like Morty, so that works. All right, let me try to actually spell that. Morty. Darth. Choose an adjective. I need an adjective. Green wins, so we're going to say green. Choose a food item. Oh, I liked evil. Damn it, I should have waited. Bananas. B-A-N-A. B-A-N-A-N-A-S. Thank you, Gwen Stefani. All right. Choose a year. Give me a year. 2005, all the way back then. A cost. Actually, I'm going to take Marlene's. We're going to say it's $19.99. Notice I'm not putting a dollar sign in front of that. I'm just typing in 19.99. So thank Marlene for that one. I'm going to use that instead of that. And then a random number. 8. Good. I like it, Greg. All right. So here's their story. There once was a dolphin named Morty. Morty was very green and only ate bananas. How he got bananas, I'll never know. Morty got the same food from the store 8 times a month, and it always cost $19.99. And this was way back in 2005. Marlene, you know what's funny is I almost made a Prince joke when she said it's 1999. And Greg says inflation, which is probably correct. Unless they eat a lot of bananas, because, dolphins are very hungry. But this is an example of a weird, funny, short story that uses all 7 of these prompts. And for this one, the 2005, the 1999, and 8 are all going to be stored in an array. And down here when we output, the 8, the 1999, and the 2005 are going to be those array elements. That's the important thing that a lot of students forget. Okay? All right. And do we have any kind of questions about the Mad Libs? Quite honestly, it's usually students' favorites because they get to be a little bit creative for it. So they kind of like it. All right. Let's move on to our last one. And our last assignment is going to be arrays. What everybody wants at work, arrays. All right. So the thing about this one is we're going to have a PDF and a zip file, which is going to be unusual. All right. So the PDF is, of course, going to start with a rubric because it's going to tell you how we actually are grading it. And then all the instructions are going to be down here as well, and making sure that we create our own last name, first name arrays. Now, the weird thing about this is you're going to have to download the starting file from FSO. All right. Unzip the file, and then you're going to copy and paste everything in the program.cs into your own program.cs. All right. So for this, I want to go ahead and walk you through it. So go ahead and download your zipped file, which is array assignment starting file.zip, and you would unzip it. So you just double click on it on the Mac. Now over here in Windows, I'm going to go ahead and show you what it kind of looks like. This is going to be the array starting file that once it's unzipped, it's going to have its own folder. Inside of it is going to be an SLN, user preferences, another folder, lots of different files, 3 more folders, and a lot of stuff. Okay. Now, this is the whole entire project file that you're going to need in order to even open this and run it. All right. So I'm going to go into my Visual Studio, and I'm going to go ahead and open this existing file. So I'm going to say File and Open and Project. So File, Open, and Project. Now I'm going to navigate to it, and I put this on my desktop in my Examples folder, SDI class, week number 1, arrays, an array assignment starting file. Now, chances are, if you guys download it and just unzip it where it is, it would just be in your downloads folder. Okay, so that's where it would start at. Now, I'm going to click inside of here, and I can just double click on this .sln file. And this is where usually students will message me on Slack and say, hey, Dan, your starting file is not correct, and there's nothing inside of it, right? Well, this is not quite the case. What you have to do is you actually have to open the program.cs file. And the way we do this is we need to open our Solution Explorer. So if we go up to View at the top and we come down to Solution Explorer, it's the first one down there. Now, I know the file is open because if you notice up here in the top left-hand corner, it says Array Assignment Starting File. So that's the whole entire project. Now, once I open my Solution Explorer, then I see my program.cs file right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And here is the whole thing. All right. So now I'm going to go ahead and shrink this a little bit, or maybe pull it back on the screen. There we go. So I'm going to close that one just to get some more real estate back. And what I have to do first is not work inside of this. All right, so do not do that. John says, holy big letters, Batman. Yeah, I teach the campus class, and so they can never see it from far away, so I usually make it 150%. But that's normally about what it looks like. Now, inside of this program.cs file, we're going to have all the basic stuff, including our main method. This is where all of our things go. And inside of here is a couple multi-line comments that actually explain what to do for this assignment, and it's setting up your initial first array and your second array. Now, notice that there is different ways of doing this, right? So you can either create a blank array first and then fill them in, or you can create the array and automatically fill them in, and both are correct. So do not change these and do not alter the first array or second array. So keep those as they are, okay? Now, the easiest thing to do here is to come all the way down and find the closing curly brace of our main method. And if I take my mouse and I hover over one of these closing curly braces, you can see that this is the close of the main. This is the close of the class of program. And finally, this is the close of namespace. So I'm going to go up to the close of main, and I'm going to start holding down my button and scrolling upwards to highlight everything inside of my main. From here, I'm going to go to Edit and Copy. So now all of that is going to be stored on my clipboard, right? John said, highlight it. Correct. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this file because I'm going to be done with it. So now it's blank. Now I have to create a brand new file. Now this is where we're going to be testing to make sure that we have our shared folders correct. So I'm going to say File and New, come down to Project, and making sure I go to Visual C# and over to Console App and the .NET Framework. Okay, .NET Framework is going to be super important. Do not choose .NET Core, because that's I get some people that try to do that one, and I can never open their code. So make sure it's .NET Framework. Now, if you come down here to the bottom, this is where we're going to be naming it, and this is going to be the location that we're saving it to. Now, for naming it, making sure that we use our last name underscore first name underscore arrays. So I'm going to say my last name is Williams underscore Dan underscore arrays, maybe capital arrays. There we go. All right, now the location is going to be super important because by default, it's going to save to your C drive. And if you know anything about Windows, your C drive is your main hard drive in your Windows computer. But that's actually not where we want to save this at. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Browse button, and I'm going to pull this a little bit to the right so I can see more of it. And I'm going to scroll down to this shared folders, and you're going to see it's a / VMware, and then it's going to be your Z drive. So once you click on this, these are going to be the shared folders that are going to be both on my Windows and my Mac. And from here, I'm going to choose Documents, scroll on down, and I'm going to choose Visual Studio 2017, and you're probably going to find this. Now, it's a super good idea to make a new folder that's going to contain all of our projects. So I'm going to go ahead and hit New Folder, this button in the upper left-hand corner, comes over here, and I'm going to call it Projects. Then just go ahead and double click, and now just select folder in the bottom right-hand corner. And there we go. So this is the name of our project. This is where I'm going to be saving it in our Z drive, Documents, Visual Studio 2017 Projects. Now, before we do anything else, I'm going to pull this aside for a second, and I'm going to pull this out of the way as well. And I want to talk about our Mac side of things. So remember, little window is Windows. This is our Mac. And I'm going to click on my Macintosh hard drive just to get up my Finder window. And by the way, if you can't ever get this to open, you can just click on the spotlight, which is the little magnifying glass in the top right-hand corner, and just type Finder, and that will come up as well. All right. Now, from here, we need to get to our Documents folder. And your Documents folder is going to be specific to your user account. So you can either, on your favorites, come down to your little home icon, which my home is Dan, or if you don't see it, you can go up to the top menu, go down to Go, and go Home. All right, so Go and Home. Then you can click on your Documents folder, scroll on down till you see that Visual Studio 2017, and here is that Projects folder that we just created. Now notice it's blank, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is back in my Windows side of thing, I'm going to go ahead and press OK in the bottom right-hand corner to create all of the basic files and folders for that C# project. And it's already done. Now, if I go back and look at my Mac side, notice that folder is now here as well, and all of the different files and folders are going to be inside of it. All right. The most important one is going to be that program.cs file. And this is a fun little Mac tip. If you highlight it and just press the space bar, you can take a quick peek at it using a preview. All right. So this is going to be matching our program.cs. Are you ready with me so far? Any questions? Everybody good? Now, once we get that done, we can then start coding inside of our Visual Studios in our Windows. And the first thing I'm going to do is go inside my main, and I'm going to go up to Edit and paste in for my clipboard. And this is all of the starting stuff from my other file. Now, of course, if it gets messed up a little bit, just use your tab keys and you can fix all the spacing and stuff. Usually this is the only one that kind of gets messed up a little bit, is the first one. But, you know, take your time, not like I'm doing here, and fix it for yourself. There we go. Okay, that was the first part. Now what you have to do is you actually have to start solving the problems. And you're going to be using the first given two arrays, and you're going to have to find the sum of the two individual arrays. Now what I mean by the total sum of the two individual arrays is you're going to add up each of the different elements in the first array. That is going to be the sum of the first array. Okay. Now, it's super important that you are not using the numbers. So do not type in 34 plus 20 plus 91 plus 49, because that's not using the array elements, right? That's just doing simple math with numbers. What you have to do is you have to actually use the array elements and actually allow the computer to calculate that sum for you. All right. Can't really go into much more detail without totally giving it away, but that is how you're going to get those sum numbers. And once you get the sum, then you're going to put it in a console.writeline and give it back to the users. And what that's going to look like is, let me go ahead and click on the finished one. So it's going to look something like the total for the first array indexes is 194. The total for the second array indexes is 405. So that's going to be the total sums for the first and second arrays. Next section, you're going to have to find the average value of the two arrays. How do you find an average number? Anybody know? How do you find an average of something? Well, no. So Greg said add up both and divide by 2. There you go. Alexandria said it. You add them all up and divide by the length. Right? So what the average is going to be is the sum that you found before, so whatever the sum is, divided by how many items are inside of the array, right? So you're going to use the sum that we calculated in the first part, and then divide that by the length of the array. Okay, so that's going to give you the average, which is going to give you something like this. When you output it, the average of the first array is 48.5, and the average in the second array is 101.25. I will give you the big hint about this. Make sure you're checking these with a calculator, like actually hand do with a calculator, to make sure your number is matching the given output, because there is some trickiness. That's all I'm going to say about it. So you want to make sure that you are testing that. Next section, create a third number array. So this is where you're actually going to have to create your own array. And to fill in the different array elements, you're going to have to use the first and second array. So for example, the index of 0 of the first array is going to be what? Well, that's going to be that 34. The index of the second array is going to be that 42. All right. So the third array is going to be the sum of those. So it's going to be that 42 plus 34. So inside of it should be that 76. Now, the key tricky part about this is that you should not be typing in 42 and 34. You need to be actually using the arrays and their associated indexes. So what you're going to be ending up with is a new array that you're creating of the same length as the two other arrays, and you're going to put the sum of each individual one inside of it. So when you output it, you're going to output the new array created from the values looks like this. So this is going to be the first array and the new first, let me try it again, the first index in the new array. This is going to be the second index in the new array, third index in the new array, and finally the fourth index of the new array. All right. One more section. I'm going to give you this string array, and it's going to be a famous quote, and it's out of order. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to figure out the correct order, and then you're going to concatenate them in the correct order to form a complete sentence. Now, you're going to be doing this, and you're going to store it inside of a string variable. So this is the number one thing that people forget, is you have to create a string variable and then set it equal to, and then you're going to concatenate in the different array elements in the correct order. Once you get it correct to output, then you're going to go ahead and output to the user this whole string variable. So again, it's going to look something like this, and this is going to be the full sentence. All right. Once you get started on it, it's going to be a lot faster than it is, but that's the basic crux of it. Now, I wanted to show you something else. So inside of my program.cs file, I have all of this starting code. However, in my Mac side of things again, remember Windows down here, Mac up here, if I take a quick peek, notice that there's nothing inside of my program.cs. Why is this? Well, it comes down to this. If we look at the little tab that's program.cs, notice that there is an asterisk that I'm pointing at, right? It didn't save it, right? So in order to make sure that that is saved, you have to press the save icon. Now, also, when you run it, so when you go to debug, start without debugging, it automatically saves it as well. Now, once you go ahead and save it, and you come back, and now you look at it, here's all of your code. So make sure that it is saved before you do anything else. Now, so I don't forget, oh no, I started Dreamweaver. Force quit. Okay. By the way, if you use Dreamweaver, programmers will make fun of you. So don't do it. I do it sometimes, and I'm like, Dreamweaver. And they're like, you still use Dreamweaver? And I'm like, oh. Greg asked what it is. Good question. It's Adobe's version of HTML and CSS editor. So it's for making web pages and stuff. Yeah, we do it usually by hand or other things. So there's a lot of other stuff that we can use. Now, what I want to show you, though, is how to upload things and making sure that we're uploading the correct file. So in order to make sure that we're meeting the requirements of our rubric, let me go back up and let me zoom on in. We have to make sure that we submit the whole project folder and not just the CS file. In order to do this, John got it, we zip it. All right, so back on my Mac side of things is the easiest place to do it. I'm going to go back all the way to the projects folder, all the way back up. And this right here, Williams_Dan_arrays, is the whole entire project folder because all of the individual files and folders are underneath it. Now, to zip it, it's as easy as right mouse clicking on it and going to compress. Right mouse click and compress. Once you do that, it creates this zipped file, and this is actually what you would upload to FSO. Okay. Now, let me scroll that away. Let me shrink that back down. And the reason we do this is once you have this zipped file and you can move it basically anywhere, and this is why you would upload it. And when I download it, I would unzip it, which would create the whole folder. And notice everything is now inside of it again. Okay, so I get all the different files and folders inside of it. Does anybody have any questions about what to submit or how to zip? Yeah, it's much easier to upload, correct. Absolutely. Also, if you are one of those people that would like to do it inside of Windows, you can easily do that as well. All you have to do is make sure that you go to the right folder, and again, that's your shared folders, documents, and again, this is our Windows side of things. Visual Studio 2017, projects, here's the whole project folder, right under the projects folder one, right? And then you just right mouse click it, and the only difference is when you send to compressed folder. Okay, send to and compressed folder. Well, that's nice. I have no idea why it actually gave me that. Hold on one second. Boop. Nice. File not found or no read permission. Oh, good. Well, do it from the Mac side. John said fail. Correct. I actually have no idea why I can't do that, actually. Huh. That is super strange. The funny thing is, I've actually never really tried it. Oh, that one worked. All right. I don't actually know what was going on there, but you'd basically just right mouse click on it and do the send to and compressed. No, John said maybe because I moved it, but it's still actually in the projects folder. The only thing I actually moved was the zipped file, which has nothing to do with the other one. All right. So any way you do it, just make sure that you zip the whole entire folder is what I was trying to get to. All right. So that will satisfy this rubric one right there, and you will not get an automatic 0. All right. Which brings us down to the end of week number 1. Yay. We went a little bit over, 10 minutes over, but I hope it was worth it because we went through everything and made sure that we went step by step through most of the different stuff. All right. Does anybody have any kind of questions? Oh, that's actually interesting, and Rachel is probably 100% correct. She said maybe it's because we have it open in Visual Studio. I am actually going to close that solution because I want to test that because I think you are correct. Let's right mouse click, send to, and compressed. Nope. All right. I'm going to give you an extra star there, Rachel, but I have no idea what's going on. But I'll eventually figure it out as well. But does anybody else have any kind of questions about anything for week number 1? It is a lot to do, so make sure that you are really biding your time and starting on it early so you are not waiting till the end and rushing. All right. Also notice that a lot of the instructors and the lab assistants are staffing usually all during the week, but usually on the weekends it's a little bit less, so make sure that you're asking those questions in advance if at all possible as well. Oh, good. Marlene has a question. So go ahead. You can either type it out, or if you'd like, I can unmute you and you can ask it with your microphone as well. Unmute. All right. Give me 1 sec. Let me find you in the attendees list. All right. You are unmuted on my side, but you might have to unmute yourself as well on your side.
Oh.
Yep. Oh, I heard you for a minute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can indeed.
Okay, hey class, how y'all doing? Yes, I noticed through trial and error that when I was doing the string line, like the the data type variable equal sign and then the value, that the value had the quotation marks. But then when I wrote out the console.write line, it's just the parentheses. So there's no quotation marks on the console.write line. It's just only the parentheses, correct?
So it depends what you're actually doing. So let me go ahead and reopen that one we just worked in. So hold on 1 second. Let me just go ahead and pull up that arrays assignment. Okay, so what I think you're asking is something like this. So when you create a string variable, and I'm just going to call it name, I'm going to set it equal to quotes and then put my name as Dan, right? And then what you're asking is when you do a console.write line, open closing, and then inside of here, you would just put the name.
Yes, I saw on the Kermit the Frog the tutorial where you did that, where the parentheses was only in the string line, but not in the console, because I think I did it in a console.write line and it worked, but I want to make sure I'm doing the right syntax.
Right.
So I'm not supposed to be doing it in a console.write line. I just want to make sure I'm correct on that.
Sure. So here's the difference. So name itself is going to be a string, and anytime you have a string, you're going to use those double quotes. All right. Now, a console.write line will only output a string as well. Now, this is the weird part, right? So if I ran this right now, what it would have is it would output, should just output Dan. Let me see if I did it. Yeah, okay, good. So just Dan, right? So what it did is it output the value of name, which is Dan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, if I put quotes around name, then what it's saying is don't use the variable name, just literally output the word name. Now, when you do that, it's just going to output name because it doesn't know that that is a variable, because when you wrap it in the double quotes, it becomes a string. With me so far?
Yes.
Okay, now the important thing about this is we can actually concatenate, and that's just fancy for using a plus sign and adding more text strings to it to create one text string. So what I can do is name, and then I'm just going to put a space there. Outside of it, a plus sign for that concatenation. And now I'm going to put name with no quotes. All right. So now what this does is it takes this text string and it says add on whatever's inside of this. And what that is, it's a text string of Dan. So now when I run this, it's going to have name space Dan. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can have double quotes inside of here, but basically what you need to have is inside of this one text string. But you can do multiple ones just by using that plus sign to add them together. Now, if I wanted to add more to it, I could be fancy and then put another plus sign at the end, and I still need a set of double quotes, so a starting and ending one. And I can say, name Dan, and then I can just put, that is my name. Don't wear it out. All right. Boop. So now, basically, what the addition is going to be doing here is just going to convert this whole thing to one text string that's going to read, name Dan, that is my name, don't wear it out. With me so far?
Yes.
Yep. So we call this, by the way, descriptive text. So it just helps describe whatever the variable we're outputting. So that's pretty much about it. And the plus sign in the videos, anytime we say concatenation, that's just programming speak for use a plus sign. Okay?
Yes. Thank you.
No problem. Did that answer it? Do you have any other kind of questions?
That was the question I had on that, because I know either way you got a different result.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure I was doing it the correct way.
Well, that's good. So absolutely, it was a great question. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. I'm going to go ahead and mute you again. Oh, you muted yourself. You're so good. All right. Does anybody else have any other kind of questions that I can answer? All right. Looks like people aren't. So I'll do this. I'll stop the recording. But if you guys are watching later on YouTube, when you're watching the recorded session of this, and you guys have a question, jump on Slack in the SDI channel and ask away, and we can answer it there as well. So thank you very much for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.